Hello, everybody. Welcome to The Squad Room, the podcast devoted to creating and optimizing a healthy and fulfilling life for first responders all around the world. I'm your host, Garrett Tesla. I'm a sergeant for a sheriff's department in Southern California, and my goal is to talk to experts in a variety of fields looking for those force multipliers that I can apply to my own life. My goal is to help make you happier and healthier so that we all can pursue our challenging careers with energy, clarity, and a commitment to our oath. Our guest today, a man I've been looking forward to talking to for a long time, Tony Blauer. If you are a CrossFitter at all, you know Tony from his CrossFit Defense course. Tony teaches first responders, military, Tier 1 operators all around the world in his system, his S.P.E.A.R system. And it's the first conversation I've had with somebody in all the episodes we've done where we talk about the first few milliseconds of a fight, and even the precursors or the pre-fight indicators that we often misinterpret or just miss. And we've had firearms training experts on here. We've had people who talk about the long-term fight, but we haven't talked about just such a small amount of that initial period of time yet, which is, of course, when any fight you're in can go to hell in a handbasket quickly. So our conversation with Tony is great. I think there's a quote that really sticks out for me, and it's not just a quote he uses on the show. It's repeated in his courses and in his material, but careful what you practice because you might get really good at it. And, it's equivalent of another saying that I think has become more popular recently, this idea that practice doesn't make perfect, practice makes permanent. And he, of course, has made his mark with his concepts around the startle flinch response and utilizing those first initial subconscious movements to defend yourself. It's really interesting. He's an expert in the ideas of fear and how to use fear, and he's talks about that, and we'll have him on at another date to talk more in depth just about fear in general. Because my goal today, my initial goal was when we were talking was to spend most of our time just talking about fear, how to manage it, how to mitigate it, his ideas of how do you do fear inoculation, but how you need to go further than that. But we ended up having a great conversation about a whole bunch of other stuff, and it's a great system, and it's a great conversation, and I highly encourage anybody to check out his stuff. I think the emphasis of this was that, or what I got the most out of this was that you can't be beholden to one particular dogma in our job. You can train jiu-jitsu, you can train grappling or MMA, you can train Krav Maga, you can train your firearms, you can train with your less lethal weapons, but you can't be beholden to just one thing. And to make a real exaggerated comparison, which is what we point out in the show, I can't become just an expert in my baton. My baton has a very specific purpose at a very specific time for a very specific, reason. But I can't approach every threat with just the baton. And of course, people get that. The other idea is I can't just be reliant on my firearm. We train our firearm, we should be training our firearms hard. But I can't solve every force question and force problem with a firearm because I would be locked up in jail. And so there's obviously a huge gap in what we do, and that applies. And the same goes for using your jiu-jitsu or your Krav Maga or your Koga or your department ARCON. Those things have a value, they have a place, but we are in a fight out on the street without those rules, without the mats, without the dojo, and we need to be able to pull from these different disciplines together to create our own self-defense. And, Tony teaches a lot of civilian self-defense, and we talk about it a little bit in the show, but we're very similar to a civilian defense. We have better options because we carry them on our belt. My wife's self-defense is limited to her physicality and then pepper spray, but I have other tools on my belt, but I'm still in a reactionary mode, just like she would be if she were to be attacked. There is no proactive, there's no offensive move in law enforcement. If we're being offensive, then we're outside the bounds and scope of our job. Any force that we apply is reactionary. So that's the context of the conversation. It's really great. Check out S.P.E.A.R system. You can go to and follow Tony. He's at Tony Blauer. All the show notes from today's episode will be posted at thesquadroom.net, and you can listen to everything and then go to thesquadroom.net and click the links to follow everything that he's up to these days. And we appreciate Tony's time. Like I say, great conversation about fear, about the elements, your intent, how to be reactive, how to appropriately be reactive, and the idea is that muscle memory doesn't even exist. So it's interesting. So here's Tony. Tony Blauer, welcome to the Squadroom. Thanks for being with us.
Hey, how are you, man? I'm great. I'm good.
I've been excited for this conversation. I've been following you since probably like a lot of people who are familiar with you already. When they started CrossFit and they dove headfirst into everything about CrossFit.
Right.
That was my first exposure to you, and then some of the law enforcement training that you do. We gave your lengthy resume at the beginning of the show, but for people who hadn't heard of you yet, to hear it directly from you, what's the short version of what you teach, both to the civilians and then to law enforcement?
Wow, short version. At 56 years old, I don't know if there's a short version to anything. I basically, so if I did this real simply, I grew up in a nice suburban area and did not have any real exposure to violence, but I was really afraid of I thought I was going to get in a fight every day. It was like this obsession that I had. It was strange. And so I was very, very focused on, and this is in the 60s, any show that had any type of fighting, as a 6-year-old, as a 7-year-old, as 8-year-old, just obsessed with it, just, glued to the TV. And then when I got into my a little bit later in school, started wrestling, gravitating towards those solo sports, but contact sports. Started boxing, taekwondo, and then it was when I was 15, 16, 17, I started teaching. So I just got asked, like, it was just almost like it wasn't like a formal thing. Hey, you work out, you train, let's do some stuff. And I realized that I was obsessed with fear and managing fear. Just as an athlete, I could pick up stuff really quick, but I think, and I speak for most of the population, there was like this, what maybe a sports psychologist would refer to as a sabotage program. I was afraid of winning. I was afraid of losing. I was like performance anxiety. I knew I was good at stuff, but then if somebody said, "We'll do it here in front of people," it was like, now I was worrying about how I was going to do. And I got asked by, when I told you there's no short answer, I got asked by one of my father's closest friends to help train his kid. He knew I was like a martial art fanatic and always dabbling and stuff and doing things. And I got asked by this guy, Joey, if I would teach his kid, Mitch. And I was like, yeah, sure, man, I'll help out. Your friends are the family. And he said, I want to pay you. I go, I can't take your money. You're like a close friend of the family, And he goes, no, I want you to take this seriously. And I was, Mitchell was like 15 years old and I was like 19 turning 20. And he says to me at the time, I was making $4 an hour, like sweeping the factory floor at my dad's office. $4 an hour, Garrett, right? And this guy, Joey, says, I'll pay you $20. And I'm thinking, he must mean for 5 hours, right? Because that's the math. And he says, I'll pay you $20. I say, I can't take your money, man. He goes, no, you take this seriously. I'm going to pay you $20 and you'll come over for an hour. And I don't want you to be late. And I want you to be, prepared. And I'm thinking, did he just say $20 an hour? I mean, so I point that out only because I want people to realize, like, I never did it for money and I still don't do it for money. And it was like this weird, holy shit. And so I went over there and started teaching this kid to find out that he's got this bully issue in school. And here's really what launched what I do now. And we'll get into how I teach law enforcement, military, first responders, and the general public. Is I start training this guy for 3 months. And he ends up having he had never had the bully situation he had was all verbal abuse, emotional abuse, and it hadn't gotten physical. So I was like, I said, okay, that's cool, man. Just if the guy puts his hand on you, you got to be able to protect yourself. That's what your dad wants. I said, but no, nothing retroactive, no retribution. And so what was interesting was I come to his house one day, and he's sitting there like furious. You can see something had happened. And I said to him, okay, what's going on? What's going on, man? And he gets up and he starts swearing. Can I swear on your show?
Yeah, go right ahead.
He goes, that fucker, I had a fucking prick. I'm going, calm down, Mitch. What happened? He says, I was running through school. I was late for class, and I was running around the back of the locker banks there, and he's sitting there on the floor with some of his buddies, and he trips me in front of a bunch of people, and I wipe out, and my books go flying, and I'm embarrassed, and everyone starts laughing at me, and I'm picking my books up, and he says, I lost it at this point. I was so upset. I'm like, you fucking asshole. He's muttering under his breath, and the guy hears that, and it was the first time Mitch had asserted, right? And so the guy gets up, and that inside the reactionary gap, as all of our law enforcement friends will understand what distance that is, our non-law enforcement will go, what's he talking about? Well, someone gets nose to nose with you, right? And he walks inside the reactionary gap, and he says, what did you say? And Mitchell reflexively just grabs him, pushes him against a locker bank, and says, I don't even know who the fuck you are. You've been bugging me since school started. I don't even know you. What did I ever do to you? And Mitchell pauses, Garrett. He looks at me, and I go, and? He goes, he punched me in the face really hard, and I fell down. I go, what do you mean he punched you, Mitch? Why didn't you bob and weave like we were doing boxing shit? Why didn't you check it? Why didn't you block it? Why didn't you parry it? And this is what he describes to me, Garrett. He says, well, I had grabbed him with my left hand and pushed him against the locker bank, and I had all my books in my right hand. And as he said that, I was like, holy shit. And it was like the god of war at that moment fired this fucking lightning bolt into my head. And it said, and this is 1980, we teach self-defense wrong. And what I realized from there is, and we still do to this day in defensive tactics, and I was just in Florida, had a bunch of cops in our course, and I said, we still to this day, here we are like 30 something years later, we teach DT combatives hand to hand incorrectly. It is almost never reverse engineered from a scenario. In other words, in a real confrontation, the bad guy always controls the location. In a real confrontation, the bad guy always controls the intent and level of violence right at the get-go. And in a real confrontation, the bad guy also controls how long the fight lasts. You as a cop or you as a citizen need to figure out how to beat the guy if it's now gotten violent. But depending on what drugs he's on, what his threshold for pain is, if he's wearing body armor, if he's insane, if he's EDP, these all change people's threshold for pain. And so we like to think, and if you think back to the way nerve strikes are taught, the way palm strikes are taught. Sometimes I just kick the guy in the balls here and this happens. Oh, if you hit him with your baton on the peroneal nerve, this happens. But there's more evidence that doesn't happen. And so what we do, and so this is back, I was 20 years old, and I realized, oh my God, we teach self-defense wrong. It's not reverse engineered from the perspective of a scenario where we look at only what's going on in the scenario and go, what are the skills I would need to survive, weather, or intercept, kind of a butterfly effect for what's going on. Excuse me. And in that moment, it was like literally somebody lit a fire in my ass. I knew exactly what I had to do. And I started telling people that my goal, and this is 1980, is to change the face of violence on the planet Earth. Because I knew that there was something, I didn't have the language, the whole research on startle flinch. I didn't know, I hadn't started studying physiology or understanding, neuroplasticity, anticipatory cells, reticular cortex, and all the brain shit that we now know works, actual not neuroscience supporting brain-based learning. And it's really the frontier of future safety and law enforcement training. I knew all of this without knowing it. I knew that there was a non-gender, non-age, non-experience specific program that I lovingly, even back then, referred to as the human weapon system, way before anyone, way before there was a TV show called Human Weapon. It was like in the 80s. I said, we're all human weapons. We all know how to fight. We just don't know we know how to fight. It's been domesticated out of us. It's been weaned out of us. As soon as we put walls up and we didn't have to go hunt and we didn't have to worry about, killing somebody who is an intruder or trespasser on our land. I always make this joke in podcasts, if you and I were going into town to sell some freaking, furs that we tracked and hunted some stuff, and some marauders came onto the property, our wives were out on the deck with long guns in their hand going, ready to kill people. And it wasn't that they weren't afraid. It's not cavalier like some cool Western. It wasn't that their heart wasn't pounding. It was just that if you didn't know how to hunt and kill during certain eras in our evolution, you died. So my theory is everybody knows how to defend themselves. They just don't know they know because we've been domesticated. We live in a bubble. We think, what's the fastest police response time? If you're in your car ready to go, waiting for a call, unless the incident's happening right beside you, what do we talk about? 3 minutes, 5 minutes?
Sure, right.
I mean, bad guys only need 3 seconds, 10 seconds to shoot you, to stab you, to grab you, to punch you, and so what we did, I'm talking about 12 different stories at once, but the evolution was like this weird obsession with fear as it relates to violence. So I started practicing every type of complex motor skill: boxing, Wing Chun, grappling, wrestling, sports like gymnastics and what, I was just understanding body movement, Taekwondo, just obsessed with all martial arts. I got into some altercations when I was growing up where none of my martial arts manifested themselves. I say this now, I got interviewed by SWAT magazine many, many years ago. And I would say, and a lot of people confuse my passion for your safety with arrogance about what other people are doing. In other words, contrasting, so I get people who are a little defensive in my optics say, oh, Blauer's arrogant. He thinks his system's the best. And I'm like, hey, the difference, with what bluntness and just direct information does is it gauges the strong and intimidates the weak. And if you got a weak mind, me telling you the truth, and I was sign off a lot of my podcasts lately with don't hate me, hate the bad guy. If there were no bad guys, we wouldn't have to have this discussion. But the litmus test, as you're a police officer, how many times have you seen a dashboard, video, body cam, helmet cam, CCTV, some sort of actual incident that's being studied in class where you look at it, cross your arms and go, look, see, there's defensive tactics as taught in our academy. Do you ever see that shit?
No, we show those in briefing all the time, and it's almost never, I can even say never, it's never a textbook. It never goes the way it does when you have the blue mats out on the floor.
Right. So let me ask you this. If you watched, who's your favorite football team?
Probably the Broncos.
Okay. If you watched, did the Broncos win the Super Bowl this year? No. And I know that, but I'm just saying that just to make a point.
Thanks for reminding us.
So, but if you watch the Broncos practice and you watch the Broncos play, win, lose, or draw, are there corollary similarities in how they practice and how they play?
Sure. Right. And when you watch people do step to 2 o'clock, secure a wrist, and do like an arm bar takedown in practice, and then you watch the game is the actual dashboard body cam, do you see similarities? And the answer is no, never. And so what I did, I've taught this to Fletzy, I've taught this all over the world, and people still don't understand this. Everyone wants to do, there's a video going viral right now that I just posted with some, when I make posts online, I only use emoticons. So people can't misquote me. So I got this emoticon where I'm just fucking crying, like just sad face crying. And it's a video of some, complex motor skill gun takeaway from a Jack Reacher film. And what they do is they go, here's I don't know if you've seen it. Here's the, empty hand combatives guy from the Coast Guard. And here's this Marine combatives person. And here's a UFC fighter. And they're going to teach you this move. And it is so irresponsible because I tell people this, and it's not that these people are good or bad. It's not about them as athletes. And that's where I create the tension online. The purpose for my tension online and why I always make a joke. I wish I could learn how to get my haters to pay me, how to monetize haters, because I'd be so wealthy.
I'm trying to make the world safer still, 36 years later, by provoking people to think. If you're careful what you practice, you might get really good at the wrong thing, is one of our mottos. Careful what you practice, you might get really good at the wrong thing. So I look at this, it's an incredibly complex motor skill that has like 6 or 8 maneuvers to it, including, deflecting the gun, securing the gun, disarming the gun. And at no point during it does the role player move. You just do all these moves and nobody moves. And I'm like for decades, I've been telling people, only watch the bad guy. If you want to learn how to protect yourself in the street, watch street attacks, and then reverse engineer the movement. And that is what I do with our drills. So it's not like I found like some cure for violence and I'm hiding it and trying to monetize it. I'm very open with sharing what we do. And so, we've put that out there in an effort to make people safer, saying, look, this is all you need to do. And it's based on understanding our body's natural instinctive and intuitive radar, which is what I refer to as our danger GPS. It's all like every victim of violence who ever lives to tell the tale said they had a bad feeling inside them. Every single one of them. You've gone into calls into a room and you slow down, you pause somewhere, the bad guy's still there. There's a vibe, it's something energetic in the air. It can be black box, we can't replicate it, we can't talk about it, we can't prove it, but it's like, how did you know to stop there? Something felt wrong and I trusted my instincts, right?
Sure.
And then there's been times you've been punched in the face or the guy got away, and afterwards you were like, damn, I knew he was hiding behind that thing, right? I mean, you're laughing because that's true. It happens all the time. So we tell people, well, this is what my specialty is. My specialty is looking at something that people think are somehow mystical or complicated and demystifying it. So if I said to you, if you've got a suspicion, an inkling, like a premonition about something, what will it cost you in US currency to explore that? 0, right? You just get a bad feeling. And so what people do is they have this internal conversation where they go, I'm just imagining that. They shut it down. They deflect it. Cognitive dissonance. That'll never happen to me, right? I live in a bubble, whatever it is.
Right.
And what we tell people is just always choose safety. I tell to all my cops I teach, just choose safety. There's no downside to choosing safety. And if it turns out to be an incorrect premonition, you're still safe. And if it turns out to be like the pre-contact indicators, the vibe was right, and you just, right, like no cop should ever approach on the driver's side, ever. That's not, like, so what it'll cost you in U.S. currency to always do a passenger side approach? Zip.
Right, 0.
What has a driver's side approach cost some cops?
Oh, their lives.
Their lives. So, and I say this in every course, so what I've created is a formula to apply to everything, and choosing safety could be disengage, call for backup, and it could mean gunfight, move towards the danger, right? What is the safest thing you could do? Like in an active shooter and a shootout thing, like not understanding the difference between cover and concealment can cost you your life, right? Right. So,
sure, yeah.
So like safe isn't hiding behind your car door.
Right.
Right. And so if we, instead of telling people to memorize things, if we said, do the safest thing you could do right now based on your skill set and your knowledge of the situation. We always say, what is the scenario? And so we've created a brain-based personal defense system where I can work with like tier 1 operators from different countries, the highest level, the guys that chase terrorists, all the way down to women's shelters, all the way down to, we do everything, because after, this little 7-year-old kid who, just is somehow infatuated with like, why fear? What is that? I figured out that there are, instead of it being like a martial art or a complex motor skill bias, that we need to make this about how humans move. And so I came up with a system that's got like kind of like 4 elements to it. If we look at it like a chemical, right? What makes up safety? The 4 ingredients to this chemical equation is, I need to have situational awareness. In other words, if I don't know how to pick up danger, then danger will get really close to me before I know what to do. I
Right.
then need to, if I'm near any danger, it is a natural human response to get a fear spike. We don't teach cops, military, or citizens how to manage fear. We talk about it. We say fight or flight. We talk about physiology, tachypsyche, auditory exclusion, tunnel vision. But nobody says, here's how you control that, or here's how you accept it and move on. So the four steps to choosing safety are: one is I've got to have a dialed in functional situational awareness. I need to embrace and recognize a fear spike. I then now need to act on the fear spike and take it and turn it into something that's cathartic or empowering. In other words, how do I use fear as a fuel as opposed to something that throttles? So fear can throttle, or it can fuel, right? It can lead you to supercharge what you need to do next. But only if you understand the difference between the biology of fear and the physiology of fear and the psychology of fear. So we're big into that because all that matters is what you're thinking at the time of your confrontation. And that confrontation could be, I got to talk to my wife about something. I got to talk to my boss about something. I got to talk to my kids about something. Why are you putting it off? Everything is fear. Fear throttles everything in life: who we talk to, who we marry, how much money we make, how much weight we lift, whether or not we defend ourselves, right? Is all throttled by fear.
So this is an interesting point because we emphasize, I mean, we being the profession, not just this show, but fear inoculation. You know, and the concept that if you mitigate fear and you train for it, you implement fear into your training, then it's not as it doesn't control the outcome as much. Are you
Correct.
doing that in a different way, or are you saying that you need to acknowledge the existence of fear and what's going to happen physiologically?
Well, yeah. It's both, and it's not that what you guys are doing is correct.
Okay.
I'd have to see the scenarios to give a more detailed observation. But if you've got somebody who's like afraid of the recoil of a gun, talking to them about the physiology of fear and the psychology of fear isn't going to help them shoot the gun. They're still always going to be afraid of the report and the kick,
Right.
the kickback. So if you got like if you're helping out teaching concealed carry or basic self-defense to, women or people who've never shot a gun, even people who want to shoot a gun, you could have new cops or, you and I are still afraid of a recoil. We like, there are times where you didn't realize you ran out of ammo and you go click and that gun, and what do you do? That gun jerks because you're anticipating the recoil, and what do you do right away? You're an experienced shooter. I'm fairly experienced. I do that, and I'm always like, oh man, I can't believe I did that. Like I thought I was past that.
Right.
Right. So depending on what mode you're in training, it's. But here's the thing: is by understanding that it's physiology, you convert it tactically faster. Right? So if you think like a flinch is effeminate or unwarrior-like or cowardly, and you've got this really negative association to it, it will create more fear about doing it, which will, again, create its own problems. So doing scenarios to stress inoculate so you manage your fear is great to do if these are the conditions. The scenario is realistic. The role player is replicating what's really going to happen. Otherwise, you're getting really good at the wrong shit, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing is, if you're doing force on force with simunitions or UTM, and now the first time you do it, your shooting sucks. You go in there, you're afraid to get shot, performance anxiety. Now you go in there and you're the range master or whoever's watching and says, hey, Garrett, think about this. Remember the Tula drill. Remember this. Watch here. You're not clearing this corner. Did you see this guy here? You do it enough times. Now it's like, okay, we're doing this again. And your brain and body start to stress inoculate to it. What I'm doing is something deeper. We do that, and everyone does that. But if everybody does that, why do we still see people hesitate in the street? Why do we still see that bad guys shoot more accurately than good guys statistically? That miss versus hit numbers are super, super low for trained cops. And so what I'm talking about is the same thing, is that I gave you the football analogy earlier. If I look at cops training and then I look at gunfights, I see different shit, right? Mm-hmm. And so I go like, all the evidence to do the training right is there. You need to reverse engineer videos of gunfights. That will save cops' lives. How fucking simple is that, right?
Yeah.
You need to have smart people look at that and go, that's what the bad guy did, and that cop wasn't able. In other words, what I'm saying at the scientific level, in terms of like behavioral science, that this officer who got shot by the bad guy, his training didn't support his last game, right? If we use the sport analogy, I'm not being cavalier about somebody getting shot at all. I'm just saying this is something that we can relate to.
Right.
That if I watch a boxer train and then he goes out and he fights and he looks like the boxer trained, but he lost on points, we go, man, you just, maybe more conditioning. You just look like you were, in those 3 rounds, you look like you were getting tired. We can see where he's missing, right? If he gets knocked out in the second round, we go, okay, yeah, the guy was out of his league. But we still see jab cross. We still see that. But you watch a lot of fights where you don't even see the movement that was trained. Why? Because the situational awareness, and follow my formula. We didn't even get to number 4. Number 1 is situational awareness. Number 2 is I get a fear spike. Number 3 is I need to manage my fear. And only when I manage my fear can I choose safety and deploy functional movement. So number 4 is functional movement. But they're all in mesh. They're all interconnected. If you can't manage fear if you don't have situational awareness, right? But if I see danger coming towards me, what will me as a human being do? I'll get a fear spike, right? Mm-hmm. I then stay on the X, deer in the headlights, can't get my gun out of the holster, can't hit the guy, can't let go of his hand, hypervigilant. I'm in the fight. This guy's punching me in the face, and I'm still trying to get on that arm lock, arm bar, because I can't. Why can't I let go? The startle flinch. When you flinch, you lock down. People don't realize this. When you startle flinch, your body locks down on whatever it's holding. So if somebody makes that explosive movement at you, and they're on you, and your hands were kind of in an interview posture, and you went and indexed, your gun, and you grabbed it, and he's on you, at the moment of flinching, your body contracts at a violent speed. We show pictures in all our courses of people caught in a flinch, and you'll see whatever they have in their hands is they're locked on. We need to recognize what happens, so we need to weaponize the flinch. And that's what we teach. That's what S.P.E.A.R is. S.P.E.A.R is spontaneous protection enabling accelerated response. That's the acronym. And functional movement is notice like if I said, what's functional movement for a grappler? They'd say, well, I got to double leg the guy. I got to secure the guy's position. I got to get cross body. I got to get behind him. There's a bunch of really good moves, and I love grappling, right? Mm-hmm. What's functional movement for a Thai boxer? Well, it's a clinch, it's knees, it's maybe a shin kick, dropping an elbow on the guy. Like every combat bias has 3 or 4 great functional movements, right? Mm-hmm. But the problem is, in a real fight, and this is what I always say is this, and let all your listeners just kind of meditate on this for a moment. The litmus test isn't what we believe. The litmus test is what we see. And what we see is the CCTV. So if I look at 100 fights today, and I'm talking about it, here's how I qualify a fight. If there's more than one camera and people going, get him, it's a douchebag fight, right? So I'm talking about, don't study douchebag fights. We're not going to learn anything. That's like a sensual fight. That's illegal in most countries. We are agreeing to fight. That's not self-defense. There's a lot of people, and I really frown on this. We've got some private forums online where guys go, hey, check out this self-defense fight. And I'm on there. That's not self-defense. Those are 2 douchebags fighting. Get it straight. Mm-hmm. Just the fact that they're kneeing each other and elbowing each other, hitting, and yet somebody's getting hurt, that's not a real fight. And one of the things that I'm going to do in the next year or 2 is redefine self-defense. Because if you look up in Merriam-Webster and all dictionaries, it's something to the effect of the physical act of protecting your property or your life. That leaves out D1, detect and avoid. It leaves out D2, defuse and de-escalate, which is a moral, ethical, and legal requirement in normal societies. And then it starts with the fight is already on, right? Mm-hmm. And so even our cultural definition for self-defense is the fight has already happened. So it doesn't promote any type of situational awareness. It doesn't promote any verbal de-escalation. So a couple of my goals through the talks like these is to get people to think, we have language like get to the left of the ambush. And then, that's all great for like a security expert. And I even challenge that to say, hey, do you know of any cops or military with tracker training, situational awareness training, real experience that ever been compromised and jumped in a real fight? Fuck yeah, of course. I mean, there's tons. So I always ask this, like when I got a class, a bunch of people talking about how important situational awareness is. I said, does anyone know of a cop that's been ambushed, lost his life? Yep. How about a soldier? Yep. What about a Marine? Yep. What about, somebody else in some tier 1 special operations group? Yep. I go, but these guys have the best situational awareness in the world. How does that happen? And so what I only talk about this is our kind of our motto and the premise behind what we do is all fights are dangerous, but the most dangerous fight is an ambush. And an ambush, we know this from a neuroscientific level, an ambush bypasses your cognitive brain and triggers shit in your reptilian brain, amygdala, limbic system. Those things take over. And that is why if a startle flinch results, we know that the movement that you thought you were going to do, the stuff that you were taught in the academy, gets bypassed. And so what we've done, we put in place, and this is how we make cops safer. This is how but people have to have an open mind to go, holy shit. The startle flinch is like an airbag in a modern car. Imagine if you had to, in a car accident, you're minding your own business and somebody blows a light and you just realize you're sitting there, you're like, oh shit, right? And you have like 1 second, you're starting to flinch and cover. Mm-hmm. Imagine if you had to push a button near your radio that said deploy airbag.
Right.
You wouldn't have time, right? And so I want you to think about this. Every martial art move from any defensive tactic system is a complex motor skill. Mm-hmm. And that's the way it's taught. When he grabs you here, do this. If he grabs your gun with this hand, do this. If he throws a punch, do this.
Sure, yeah.
And all those moves are stored in your complex motor skill in your brain. And so in an ambush, you have to, like the airbag metaphor, you need to push a button in your head. You got to look at the attack, identify the attack, transfer that through the optic nerve into the brain, download the right, and this happens in milliseconds, unbelievably fast, but it's still all these steps. You know what's faster than all that? The startle flinch. When somebody goes through a car windshield and they're not wearing their seatbelt, where's their trauma? Right. Always on the hands and forearms, correct?
Oh, yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. They go through. There's always trauma in a knife attack from the front. Always trauma on the hands and forearms. And so what those are is I look at that. And so we've weaponized the startle flinch because the startle flinch bypasses cognition. Those hands shoot up to protect your head. And so what we've figured out is if we modify an interview posture so the fast twitch muscle fibers are moving. So instead of have my hands in a little steeple down in front of my belt buckle, my hands, we've got 3 or 4 that we teach cops, congruent with de-escalation. So we've got a beautiful, not a facade, but a congruent, harmonious position. If I try to talk somebody down, my hands might be up. I'm calming them. If I'm listening to somebody, I might cross my arms, kind of get a little Jack Benny for my older listeners here. I'd say this in the younger class, and people are Googling who Jack Benny is. But we show these movements by having 4 or 5 different nonviolent postures. You're keeping your fast twitch muscle fibers moving, right? Because you can't bounce up and down like you can't like shuffle in front of somebody in the reactionary gap like you're boxing them. Right. So you're breathing more. Fast twitch muscle fibers are in motion, and it's very, very subtle. And if the bad guy makes a sudden move to your gun or throws a punch, your startle flinch, which what we've done through a series of very, very research drills, is we've created a way for you to deploy your organic airbag, which is the flinch, and it's freaking amazing. And we get feedback every class. Listen, I don't know how many cops listen to your show, but they're more than welcome to pop on our website or email me. We'll send you like 10 pages of testimonials, unsolicited testimonials. You ever see testimonials on a website that go, best course ever, thank you, Frank L., Minnesota. Like it's nobody's real name. These are testimonials from real people. They list their agency or their unit, and the comments are things like, why wasn't I taught this 20 years ago? Mm-hmm. Like, how come it's not being taught everywhere when people do it? And because it's the human weapon protocol from 36 years ago that I finally figured out how to articulate, is that when you flinch, if I said to you, I'm going to stand in front of you, I want you to grab me by the head and pull me down into a knee. Guess what you're going to do? You're going to lift your hands up. Your fingers are going to be splayed. Your arms are going to go outside 90. You're going to reach out and grab me. Guess what your hands do when you flinch? Your hands come out to protect your head. Your fingers are splayed. Your arms push away the danger outside 90. right? And
Mm-hmm.
if I said to you, grab my head and drop an elbow, grab my head and palm strike me, push away the danger, and go to your weapon, create some space. So it's very, very exciting. I still have, I'm 56. I've got more passion and energy than I did when I was 20 and 25 and 30, because more people are getting it, and it's the easiest thing to teach people because it's hardwired in them.
It's all interesting, and I think that I've never really considered the correlation or the relationship or the similarity between civilian self-defense and our uses of force. But they really are. I mean, we are always in a defensive mode, right? I mean, we're not military, we're law enforcement,
Right.
so we have to
Yeah,
be
you're reacting to
right. We
the
are
problem.
reacting, we're defensive. If we're ever offensive, then we're outside the bounds of the law, right? And
Right.
just by nature, we have to be. We always, like you said earlier, and I can't agree with you more about how. And you said this on a podcast somewhere else recently, where we often mistake that that we are in control of the fight.
Right.
That we control that where how long it goes or how it ends, and that's just not true. And the faster that a newer officer can understand that, the better their training can be. And yeah, you keep going to like the body cam and all that, and I can't count how many times I've been in encounters where I didn't use a single bit of the ARCON I learned in the academy, or
Right.
I didn't use a single bit of my refresher course
Let me interrupt.
grappling.
Here's what you did. I
Yeah.
didn't even see the fight, but you won the fight. It's called functional movement.
Hmm.
It's got to be functional. If it was dysfunctional, you'd have lost, right? And so what you figured out is like, oh shit. Now here's the thing, and I want you to finish that thought. But as a good cop, you tried to use the academy stuff and realize you just got popped in the face. The guy pushed you backwards. You're off balance on your car, and you're a big guy. You grabbed him, you spun him, you threw him, you shook him, you bounced him, you threw a knee, not to the authorized target. Right? You
Right.
just said, I got to win this fight because this guy might kill me, or this guy's going to get away, and I need to apprehend him.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and then there's an element too of just did I get lucky? If in all that too. When you keep reverting back to the training, and you have, and I might get this wrong, but you have 4 levels of encounters, and you kind of touched on it. Um, but I thought that was interesting too, and maybe we can go through those real quick,
Sure.
because I think that a lot of people mistake probably what is it level 2 for level 4, which you classify as violent encounters. But can we talk
Right.
about those real quick?
Are you talking about the categories that I'm
Yeah,
talking about?
categories. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, this is an interesting talk. And it again, I always smile inwardly and go, how to monetize my haters, because somebody who's like pro jiu-jitsu thinks I'm criticizing them, and someone who's pro Thai boxing thinks I'm criticizing them. And so let me state up front, I've been a martial artist since I'm 7, right? And so that's, uh, like 49 years
Hmm.
that I've had a love for combat movement. But I need people to understand that a violent encounter triggers a different emotional, psychological, and physiological response. And how we feel affects how we think, and how we think affects how we feel. Both influence how we move, which is why, if I said to you, what's the hit percentage for police in gunfights? It's freaking, depending on where you're at, 5%, 10%, 20%. Why isn't it 100%? So like, if you look at a lot of shootouts, there's not a lot of movement. We've got simunitions, we got UTM, we're doing the stress inoculation because we're not understanding what happens during sudden aggression. So the definition from my system, S.P.E.A.R, again, S.P.E.A.R, spontaneous protection enabling accelerated response, it's the study of human movement as it relates to violence, fear, and aggression. That's been my definition since the late 80s, early 90s. The study of human movement as it relates to violence, fear, and aggression. Because real violence produces different changes in me. Aggression, sudden aggression on the part of the bad guy produces different changes. And my love or fascination with a complex motor skill from some martial arts system or style that I'm studying may or may not be appropriate, right? I've got to go through 3 extra stages to extract that muscle memory which doesn't exist. Muscle memory literally doesn't exist. But I got to extract it and download it, and then neuromuscularly communicate that. So I've got to go, oh shit, he's open for a kick. I know how to do a tie kick. I'm going to shin kick him. And I think that, and this can happen like in blinding speed, but that only works if I'm emotionally, psychologically in control of myself and physically dominating my threat. And that's why, that's the misconnect that we see when we watch a UFC or an MMA fight or a boxing match. These guys know who they're fighting. They know when they're fighting. They know the weight class they're fighting. They're warmed up. They're in shape. No cop has that luxury. You do not know when you're fighting next. You don't have a mouth guard on. You don't have a cup. You didn't go to a rules meeting, right? Mm-hmm. There's no referee there. You're not on a mat. Everything changes. But how many cops go to MMA gyms and boxing gyms? Not as many as they should. Right. But the connection is, I need to get tougher and learn how in case this fight happens. But they're still training. Track this. I love this. They're still training like the Merriam-Webster dictionary. They're still training at the right of the ambush, not the left of the ambush. If you agree to grapple, you bypass D1, D2. If you agree we're going to grapple now, okay, we're going to choke each other out. Okay, let's put gloves on. Okay, now we're going to do MMA. Now, the person who's not listening carefully thinks I'm criticizing that. I'm saying that that's part of the package, mm-hmm. but the more important part of the package from a psychological performance perspective is D1, D2. Detect and avoid, defuse and de-escalate. The ability to manage our fear and our decision-making protocol in advance of the attack. That if I step in the ring and agree to box with you in training, or if I step in the room and I go, let's do force on force, I am missing the ambush part. Mm-hmm. And so that's huge. So what I did, going back to your question, is to explain the categories, is to help people understand that. I want them to understand that the categories create an unconscious bias that forces us to select an option, an answer from the style or system we're practicing.
Right.
So if I said to you, and here's a great analogy. I want you to the people listening to the show can't see this, but we're on Skype and we can see each other, and they're just listening to the audio. But I want you to pretend that you could see each other, because you've all done FaceTime or Skype or something like that. And I want you to use body language for yes, you understand. Do it now. What are you doing? So Garrett's nodding his head up and down. Now I want you to say, I want body language. I'm talking. I want you to disagree with me using body language. What are you going to do? He's now turning his head left and right. Now check this out. This is fucking amazing. I love doing this. Now I want you to bypass body language, which would be the fastest trigger, right? Because people nod up and down without thinking, yeah, I like this. I agree with this, right? Like I'm doing now. Mm-hmm. This is cool. I dig this. Some of you are listening to this show and your head's nodding up and down going, yeah, Blauer's right on. And then some of you with an unconscious bias are nodding your head left and right going, Blauer's a fucking asshole. I don't like him, right? And so, like, did you just tell yourself to laugh there? No. This is what I mean. Physiology is faster than cognition. So now check this. I want you to agree with me in Japanese. Now, what are you doing? Like your eyes are looking up and to the left because you're trying to go, what do I remember from, like you're thinking, do I know any Japanese for yes or no, right? And so here's what's happening. If I say to you, disagree with me in Portuguese, right? Do you know any foreign languages?
No. Okay.
So Spanish. So I want everyone to listen to this. This is fascinating to me. If you study SPE.A.R, you'd know how to say we know, because SPE.A.R is from France. This is a metaphor. Mm-hmm. If you knew Portuguese, it's BJJ. If you knew Kyokushinkai, you'd know how to say yes or no in Japanese. If you knew Korean, you were Taekwondo. You follow what I'm saying?
Sure.
So if I say to you, now this is amazing because we might have to post the video of this. But while you were listening to me explain that, guess what your head was doing because you understood?
Nodding, probably.
It was nodding up and down. You didn't even know it. And your head is nodding. I hope everyone's tracking this. When we study a style, it's like learning a language. Mm-hmm. And if I say to you, I want your money, give me your wallet, and you got to go, oh, he just said that in Portuguese. I'm going to answer in Portuguese, and then I'm going to do this move. We're deconstructing. Our brain is going, what's he saying? What's he want? Then we're going, this is our response. What I'm talking about here, and this is again just a metaphor for people, is I'm talking about how do I make you faster as a human weapon system? I want you to survive. Remember my thing, hashtag don't hate me, hate the bad guy.
Right.
I'm trying to make you survive. If you're a good human and you love jiu-jitsu, taekwondo, Thai boxing, I want you to be safer sooner. So I'm training people to take their cognitive brain and learn to respect what the reptilian brain is going to do without their permission. And when you cultivate a relationship between the two, you're fucking smarter because now you're a human weapon system. You're going, listen, I've got all this physiology, all this DNA genetic shit that's been around for over 80,000 years helping cavemen fight other cavemen. Why aren't I integrating that stuff? In fact, that's our thesis statement, 20 years old, over 20 years old. What does your body do prior to any training? Does that have a protective or a combative application? If so, why aren't we integrating it in all training? And so the S.P.E.A.R system is the cognitive study. On purpose, I'm studying startle flinch and how it relates to self-protection. And so what the categories was I got so frustrated with people going bullshit, bullshit, bullshit. And I go, look, well, here's a video of all these pro fighters flinching when they got hit late at the bell or hit early or an illegal shot comes in because your reticular cortex, your brain goes, oh, well, he's not going to knee me when my hands are down. Boom, the knee gets in. But the knee gets blocked, right? When I'm in the right position, because now my brain's awareness switches on.
You're cued for it. Yeah, sure.
You're cued for it. Where do you start in your agency? Where do you start weapon protection drills from? Someone's grabbed your gun. Where does a drill start from?
From your holster.
Right. And your role player's grabbing your gun and you start there.
Yeah.
So you practice letting somebody grab your gun.
Right.
To practice the counter, you've practiced letting somebody grab your gun. When you're in your agency, when you're practicing getting out of a headlock, where do you set the role player up and where does the drill start from?
From the headlock.
So you're practicing letting somebody put a headlock on you. In other words, you create an unconscious bias in defensive tactics. And the unconscious bias is, no, this is how we do it. I don't agree with Blauer. We do it from here. Mm-hmm. I had a guy there was a video I posted yesterday on my Facebook page. And so when I talk about weapon protection, I talk about the 3 C's. Everything we do is principle-based, based on how brain-based science works and functional movement works and their relationship. So for our weapon protection program, we say, just remember the 3 C's: clear, control, counter. Clear, control, counter. And so it's clear yourself from the line of fire of a knife, of a bullet, of a fist. Control the arm, Lynn, and then counter the guy. And someone posts on there, in our system, we do this. And he posts, it's 4 stages, and the first one was deflect, disarm. They tried to come up with something else. And I said, deflecting is a cognitive skill. It's a deliberate movement. It requires some sort of parry, some sort of trapping. It assumes that you have, and I just, I'm not getting paid for this. I don't know the guy, but I'm there trying to educate people. I go, understand that clear is closer to you're in an accident, the airbag deploys, get away from the wreck, right? Mm-hmm. If I say to you, in an accident, always get out the passenger side. You don't know if that's right or wrong. Maybe the passenger side is, you're over the side of a guardrail over a bridge and you step out of the car and fall to your death, right? It's right. Like, what's the scenario? How do I clear myself from the wreck or the oncoming cars or whatever? What we do is we create language and nomenclature that forces you, the operator, to think and decide. And what that does is by forcing you to think instead of, when I say go to the left, sweep the leg, do this, do that, I'm forcing you to download shit you memorize so you're not fucking thinking. Right? Mm-hmm. So if I say to you, the guy is going to grab your gun inside the next reactionary gap program, your brain is unconsciously waiting for him to grab the gun so you can download the counter.
Makes sense.
It sounds stupid, but if you watch Ultimate Survivors, which is decades old, from Caliber Press. It interviews multiple police officers who lost their gun in a gunfight. Some of them are in wheelchairs, paralyzed. Some of them are disfigured from getting shot in the face. They all said one thing. The bad guy target glanced my gun, and then he was on me. In our weapon protection course, guess where our weapon protection starts from? Target glance.
Clarify that. What do you mean, target glance?
Target glance. Target glance is if I'm standing in front of you, you're going to take my gun from me. You would have to, with your eyes, look at where my gun is. Is it on my left hip? Is it on my right hip? What type of holster is it? Do you have to defeat some sort of, the bad guy wants the gun. So if I say to you, so target glancing is you go into a bar and you're looking for a girl to ask out on a date. You're target glancing. Your eyes are tracking the room. If you go into to grab some beer to go watch the game on a Sunday and you're in the 7-Eleven, you're target glancing for beer, right? So target glance is a sudden, subtle look at what you want, and every bad guy does that.
Sure, those pre-assault indicators is another way of saying that. Then,
but guess what? So I've been talking about this for years, and I still teach people. I go, why is your drill like so? A bunch of your cops listening won't get a chance to train with me for whatever reason. Their agency won't pay. They're too cheap to self-fund. That was a dig to all of you. 30% of the officers that come to my courses self-fund because their agency's too small, won't fund them. And I'm like, really? Well, how much does your wife or your husband collect, right, if something happens to you? What do you mean you won't self-fund? You won't spend, $700 on a course? What's your life insurance policy worth? I mean, it's stupid. And so, we put the information out there. We don't hide shit from people. Do not start your weapon retention drills. First of all, weapon retention is your fucking holster. Right? It's weapon protection. If someone's going after your gun, he's not trying to clean it for you. Right?
Yeah.
Right? Mm-hmm. If it's a bad guy in a bad scenario, somebody's reaching for your gun, this is a deadly force threat. Now, if you've got the emotional, psychological self-control and the physical skills to clear yourself, control the bad guy, and arrest him, then do that. Right? So I'm not being cavalier about what to say, but your intent needs to respect the threat. Someone going for your gun intends to use it on you. That's why he's going for it. So whether it's police-assisted suicide or he's trying to kill you and run away, doesn't change the fact that he's still reaching for your gun. The point being is if the drill started with you letting a role player grab your gun, then your body's pre-contact indicator cues only start with the hand on the gun, even though in real world bad shit's about to happen. Mm-hmm. And the evidence are these survivors and other people I've talked to. Every victim of violence who lived to tell the tale said they had a bad feeling before the attack. They just didn't know what to do because nobody said choose safety. Nobody said get off the X because all our definitions are, that's good, you didn't pick up on that, situational failed you, here's a headlock counter. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, no, there's an airbag that gets deployed always. That's your startle flinch. How do you weaponize the flinch?
So how does what's the first step for an officer to do that?
Get to one of our courses. No, seriously. We got a ton of videos online, man. It's really hard in an audio interview to explain this. You'd have to almost see this, but visualize any time that you've been surprised or startled. Your hand, at a physiological level, right, just goes out to protect your head. So if I threw coffee in the screen and you thought it was real, right? Have you ever, there's some videos, there's some viral videos going around. When you post this to your blog or however you disseminate it, is there a landing page with links and stuff on it?
Yeah, thesquadroom.net.
Yeah. So beautiful, because what I'll do is I didn't know if it went to like a direct Vimeo or YouTube or something. So what I can do, if you remind me, there's a video that we use in course of this you've all seen it. It's the zombie that's embedded in some sort of like play game or someone did it with a BMW commercial years ago where like you're watching the car and then all of a sudden like this like the screen just cuts away immediately to like some creature's face. And if you're watching, right? And what do? You go, whoa, and those hands come up, you recoil away from the danger. So someone can even trigger that digitally, a startle flinch. So when we startle flinch, our hands come up and protect our head. If there's space between me and whatever stimuli that triggered the flinch, I will start to push away danger.
Mm-hmm.
So how does a cop who's listening to this understand it? Well, first of all, you want to read a little bit about this, and there's a ton of articles on our website, and there's videos. Like, you can teach this to yourself. My courses are really train the trainer courses, because what I want is, we live in a litigious society. I want to make sure that you, if you're certified to train your department, that we're there to support you on both sides of the coin. If there's a training incident, or if there's an incident in the street, and there's a best practices way to do this. But if you can't get to a course, quite literally, I've had people email me, read an article and use this, listen to an interview and use this. There's we did an interview with a group a few months ago, and the guy who was doing the sound engineering, this is unbelievable. We have the quote up on the site, where the host said, Tony Blauer's probably the only guy you can listen to that'll make you safer just by listening to the podcast. And it was so funny that the sound guy is compressing the video and doing his thing. So he's listening to this 90-minute interview, and that night he goes out to meet his mom to go take her out to dinner. It was like mother-son, I hadn't seen her in a while. And a violent encounter almost happens, and he uses D1, D2 and stuff that he picked up in there to choose safety, and then emails the host and goes, "You're not going to believe this. Holy shit." So he tells me that, it's if you're listening to the stuff, if you get a bad feeling, trust safety, take a beat, take 5 seconds before you decide what your next 5 steps are going to be, because that's going to change your next 5 minutes, and that next 5 minutes is going to change the next 5 hours. Mm-hmm. Right?
Yep. 5 years, 5. Yeah.
5 seconds to stop, pause, take your next 5 step. Is that scan and breathe? Is that look around? Is that listen for what, did I just hear a footstep? Is this guy's breathing around? Like, take that. Mm-hmm. We always say that, how confrontation management is a subtle, simple science. If you look at things as, how can I be smart every second of a minute? So that I'm, therefore, if I'm on that, I'm not talking about like being in like some paranoid state. I'm just talking about just chilling and going, I get a bad feeling about that, and then addressing that. That changes how you handle your day, which changes how you handle your week, which changes how you handle your life. And you got to be vigilant about that. You got to be constantly on that. But anyways, so startle flinch, back to your question. Like, I think we're still on question number 1. It's been 60 minutes. You asked me, how'd you get started? And I haven't stopped.
No, it's been great.
So, basically the startle flinch is hardwired in you. You want to look at what it means. Like, when I use the term target glance in the context of this, you wanted to reframe, and then when I explained to you, okay, I know exactly what you mean. So you want to have like a visual reference, and we're all visual learners. Just see it. So hands are up, fingers are splayed, your arms are outside 90. And then there's a couple of simple drills that we do. And again, we can link those up to the interview.
Yeah, I'll post a bunch of the videos
and just teach and just do this shit with you. We've been around teaching for a couple of decades. There's probably a graduate of one of our courses near you. Just Google it, get on one of our forums, and go, hey, who's done some of this Blauer shit? And I turn shit into an acronym for seriously high intensity training, because I was tired of hearing people say this Blauer shit. So I wanted it to be a compliment, because I was feeling sad. Just,
well, I think I agree, and I think that we tend to get so focused into our own dogma of the guys who might do jiu-jitsu, or the guys who do koga is another one, or
right.
Whatever you learn in the academy. And the reality is that we don't do any one particular thing. We might implement aspects of those. And in fact,
right.
my squad, we were in a scrape just a couple weeks ago, and I got a guy on my squad who's very well trained in jiu-jitsu, and I come in the scene, and he's got the guy in guard with his hooks into his legs, and he's controlling him, and he's doing well. Right. But it's not a jiu-jitsu match. It's not, right. He didn't get on his gi and set up a time. This was a guy who high on acid, who'd crashed through a window, and there's glass on the floor, and there's family members that are arguing and thinking that he's, that the cop is being assaultive. We are never just one. We're never just one mode. We have all these tools on our belt. We have a gun, a baton, OC spray. We are never just one methodology. We're never just the firearm, right? We have to kind of move with all
And
this.
so, listen, you're describing what everyone has to do in your profession. It's kind of like, metaphorically, the Frankenstein system,
Hmm.
right? Where we've got to put little pieces from what if it goes to the ground? What if it's stand up? What if it's striking? What
Hmm.
if it's knife? What if it's gun? Um, all of that is true. And so if we go back to the categories, and I say, careful what you practice, you might get really good at the wrong thing. People who practice a lot of something else are thinking, is he criticizing what I do? And so you saw that video that I think was in Colorado that went viral with the gang squad talking to the guys. I wrote an article for Caliber Press for it as
Hmm.
well. But one of the guys runs and he has a gun held, and the guy chases him, takes him down, takes his back, hooks in, and he
Yeah.
can't control the guy's arms. And
Yeah.
then the other officer comes over, he leaves the other guy uncuffed, other people in the car. And it turns out, and then of course, like jiu-jitsu claims, the victory because the guy had his hooks in and had his back. And I'm going, and I said, listen, I don't take this the wrong way, but had the suspect been more dangerous, a little bit bigger, a little bit faster, had he been getting the gun out as he was running, that would have turned out differently. Had the backup officer not been there, that had been turned out differently because that guy wasn't able to control his arm,
Hmm.
right? And so you can't look at it and go, look, jiu-jitsu won, right? Those guys kept it. Listen, they did a great job. They kept their shit together.
Hmm.
There was no excessive force. There was no negligence. Nobody got shot. People got arrested. Everything was good. What I did is my reframe, and maybe you can link my article to it. My reframe was, what can we learn,
Hmm.
right? Um, and there was a lot to learn, from it. And so it's analyzing it like that and always thinking, how do I get better? How do I get better, as opposed to going, and that's all I'm talking about is that, when a stimulus gets introduced too quickly, the body responds in a very obvious, recurring fashion. It's called a startle flinch. And depending on whether it's a front stimuli or an oblique stimuli, it produces different movements. And these are uh, things that happen all over the world, regardless of culture, which is why earlier when I said, like, right now you're nodding, body language is universal. If you get it, your head is nodding. But, so I just thought about it, and I got to go back to this. Another metaphor. If you think about like the United Nations or some group where there's a translator, there's always a refractory delay between stimulus and response while the speaker's language is translated into that language. That's what the brain does with these movements, where I might go, I should probably palm strike this guy in the head right here and stun him, and then I could, immobilize that arm, and then I can clear the weapon. But my brain immediately goes to guard or rear mount, hooks in, or it goes to shin kick, or it goes to coda, or it goes to boxing. Or what we want to do is always SOS it, but not save our souls like the original. SOS it, select optimum strategy. What is the best thing that I can do here? And part of the protocol, and listen, I tell people all the time, like, S.P.E.A.R is a bridge to your next move. S.P.E.A.R is an organic airbag that will make you safer in extremely close, violent encounter. And there's ways to weaponize the outside 90 finger splayed so that your forearm becomes like the asp that you don't have to take out. It's just there. Boom, that forearm's up and out and in between you and the threat. That becomes your workspace. Where you can do whatever you have to do. You threat discriminate at that point. Should I? So right now, if you watch my video, we'll link it, my Hicks Law video, where I show different types of attacks and how they're all stopped by the airbag.
Hmm.
And so at the moment that I've defeated the initial attack, then I can allow my bias. And for cops, because it's litigious, and you got to explain everything you do. The bad guy doesn't. Do you still want to have a default to jiu-jitsu or default to Thai boxing or default to boxing? Don't you want to weather the ambush, push away the danger, threat discriminate, and then select something from your agency's approved use of force policy? That's unfortunately what you need to do. And so tackling the guy may put you in more danger, right? Whereas maybe, shin kicking the guy or something, puts you in less danger, or stepping back and grabbing your OC is a safer thing to do. You don't want some unconscious bias to force you to rush to a movement because that's what you did. Understand, we go back to, if you're practicing what's called weapon retention, right? 99% of the people all over the world practice with the role player starts with grabbing the gun, then the officer pins the hand so the gun can't come out, and then attacks the radial nerve or the brachial or whatever. And it's not that, and I say don't do that. That's so dangerous. And people go, no, but the radial nerves, I'm not talking about the nerve. Yeah, but we're stopping the guy from getting the gun. I'm not talking about jamming the hand. I'm saying you're practicing letting somebody grab your gun so you can do the counter. Don't do that. And then I have to explain to people after, also practice what you were practicing. But practice the interception first, please. That's what'll keep you safer. Right?
Yeah.
It's
Tony,
that simple.
It's really interesting stuff, and there's a gap there. I see that you're filling a gap between what we're taught, like you just went through, what we're taught and how we're taught to respond versus what those first couple, even milliseconds, involve in that encounter. So appreciate you going through that with us and walking us through your system. For people who want to find out more about you, about your system, where can they follow you on social media, your website? Where can they learn about going to one of your law enforcement courses?
Yeah, we've got courses going on every month somewhere else, literally all over the world. We've got 2 courses this week. I mean, too late to go to, but just to show you, one's going on in just outside Vegas in Henderson, another one in South Carolina. We've got a course starting next week in Manchester, England. Lots coming up. If they just go to our website, blauer.com, there's links to our website. If you want to host a course, we've got an amazing team that travels the world helping me share this research. So if you're a defensive tactics instructor, any active law enforcement, and in fact, any active first responder is allowed in our courses. I tell people everybody fights the same bad guy at a different point in his career. So I don't care if you're a police officer, if you're corrections, if you're a firefighter, everybody needs to be safer right now. And so, we do different courses for different communities, and we've got a number of courses, but all that stuff is broken down on the website, from hosting information to attending information. Blauer S.P.E.A.R. My last name's, and I'm sure we'll link it too, but Blauer, yeah. Blauer, S.P.E.A.R, all one word. And social media, if you want to see pictures of what I eat and me making fun of people,
lots of sushi.
Just go to lots of sushi. Go to Tony Blauer on Facebook. We've got a couple of private groups for people who graduate our courses, so I can't give you those, but definitely you can get in them once you graduate. And just hop on and follow us. We've got a strong Instagram following. It's S.P.E.A.R.system on Instagram, and Tony Blauer, one word, on Instagram. And of course, if you're into CrossFit, we've got a wicked cool CrossFit program called CrossFit S.P.E.A.R, and also on Instagram and Facebook and stuff.
Awesome. And like you said, we'll link to all those in the show notes too. So if someone's out and about right now and they can't remember all those things, you can go to thesquadron.net for Tony's episode, and those will all be in there too. Tony, thanks for all your time today. Great conversation. It's something, you're actually the first person I've had on in 50 plus episodes where we've talked specifically about the initial aspects of combat. We've talked about gunfighting and that sort of stuff. So to talk about the actual physiology of our response has been really interesting, and we appreciate your time.
Thank you, man. Listen, I don't know if how many of you know who Bob Willis is. He helped write the original Caliber Press book with Gary Klugowitz called Street Survival, and it's an encyclopedia that's in so many departments. Gary saw me teach in 1993 and came up to me after and said, "You teach the 3 seconds before the fight, we all teach." And he got that, and I share that quote because I want everyone listening to this to think about that. Those are those 3 seconds where you're standing there going, what's going on? What's about to happen? And right there, that's the adrenaline dump. That's where the heart's pounding. That's why I say if you don't manage the fear spike, you can't move as functionally as you'd like to. And the evidence of that, the litmus test of that, is what we see in the dashboard video and the body cam. So hopefully people enjoyed this stuff. And at the end of the day, if I was provocative enough to make you think about what you're going to practice, that was the goal.
It's very much so. Thank you, Tony.
Thank you. Stay safe.
All right, thanks for listening to The Squad Room. Thanks to Tony for being on. We'll plan to have him back soon, and we'll talk about some bigger topics, too. I mean, there's not much bigger than defending your life, but I mean, different topics. If you like what you heard today, and if you got something out of the conversation, please consider leaving a review on iTunes. I read each of them, and it helps really spread the word about the show to other first responders who need to hear things like today's episode. If you heard something today that you know a friend or a loved one needs to hear, please tell them. You can go to thesquadroom.net and email this episode directly to them from our website. To keep up to date on the Squad Room, you can text The Squad Room, all one word, to 44222, and you can get signed up for our mailing list directly from your phone. You can also follow me on Instagram and Twitter at The Squad Room or on Facebook. Our job is tough, much tougher than anything that we can be put into a few words or one podcast episode. So if you want to reach out, start a conversation, or ask a question, you can reach me at Garrett, 2 R's, 2 T's, at thesquadroom.net. Lastly, I want to tell you that this episode is brought to you by Audible.com. With over 180,000 titles in their inventory, Audible has hundreds of audiobooks that apply to us. If it's a slow shift or a long commute, audiobooks are a great way to continue your education, after you've listened to each episode of The Squad Room, of course. To get your free 30-day trial and free audiobook of your choice, go to audibletrial.com/The Squad Room to sign up. Until next time, take care of each other and stay safe.